Hi, and welcome to the Women in Drones Emerging Aviation Thought Leaders Summit. This is being held here at the Westgate Hotel at CES 2023 here in Vegas. And I am looking forward to this next fireside chat where we will be talking about a topic that we cannot speak enough about, and that is how to attract more women into tech. Help wanted. So before we dive in, I just want to introduce our guest today. So with me is Wendy Ljungren. She's with Anzen Unmanned. And I'm also with Jessica Mason here with UPS Flight Forward. So can each of you explain your roles in drones and unmanned aircraft systems and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Wendy Ljungren, and I have many a year of aviation manned experience. And as part of that, when I was with GE Aviation, GE was looking at obviously the up and coming drone space. And I was part of a company that was founded within GE Aerospace for unmanned and getting people to fly. And then my company started off of that, where we help people get operator approvals for beyond line of sight, one-to-many over people, waivers and exemptions. So I like to get people flying.
That sounds very difficult. I'd like to understand that later as we move along.
A lot of engineering.
It was Jessica Mason, and as far as my UAS experience, it started early on from a personal level. So my dad actually flew RC planes, and him and his RC group started the Southeast Electric Flight Festival, which was the largest one in the world. So in the early 2000s, I was already kind of in the drone space, but didn't get back into UAS professionally until I was working at Tyndall Air Force Base, and I was tasked with standing up the first legal commercial off-the-shelf small UAS program for the Air Force, for the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. So I did a lot of work there. We had a lot of the same challenges we do in industry as well. And I had to actually go through and get flight physical, go through the AeroVironment Raven training, and then became an instructor, and we actually trained the first group of civil engineer small UAS operators for the Air Force. And then that brought me to my next UAS experience has been here at UPS Flight Forward. And my role on the RDT&E acquisitions and strategy team is a small UAS strategy manager, and I focus on detect and avoid technology, BVLOS, as well as vendor relationships and pretty much everything having to do with small UAS.
I knew we would get into some acronyms at some point in time here. BVLOS, Beyond Visual Line of Sight. Wendy already mentioned it. So, well, I feel like I'm here with two very fearless women to be paving the way in this industry. And as we heard in another session today, it's just a very small percentage of pilots in this field. But we're going to broaden it even beyond aviation. We're going to talk about tech in general. And companies right now, I just read a report from CNBC. Companies are saying that 60% of those interviewed are saying they can't find the right talent, the right diversified talent, and this is their biggest problem. I mean, that's big for companies to be saying that attracting women or diversifying the talent in technology is their biggest challenge. That's very important. Why is it important? Because it's also proven through a lot of research that tech companies with a diversified leadership team have better business outcomes. They're more innovative, they have better business outcomes, and they're more sustainable for the long run. So let's dive into how do we tackle some of these challenges. I'd just like to start by asking a very simple question. What motivated you to go into tech? And how early did you decide to take that path?
For me, I was clueless about tech. Reality was, this is quite a few years, but my family did not know science, technology, any of those kind of things. And a lot of people were encouraging the traditional female fields. And it was when I was in high school that I was always good in science and math. And then I was encouraged by teachers and my mom that she didn't want me to be trapped in a women's field. And so she encouraged me to become an electrical engineer. And during the electrical engineering, I decided, or you take a lot of classes, and during that time, I found out I hate semiconductors, by the way. I will never, ever become a semiconductor engineer, but I found out I love control systems, control theory, and that's where there's so many engineering types that we need to get people exposed to, that you may think you're not an engineer, but it's that one type of engineering that you hate. And there's a lot of them out there.
That's really interesting. I want to come back to role models too in a bit. What about you, Jessica?
Yeah, so I guess I got really interested in tech. Probably started with my family. So my dad's an engineer, F-16 pilot. Mom was an F-16 radar mechanic. Grandfather was an engineer, and then my grandmother was actually the first female civil engineer to graduate from Northeastern. So I had a lot of heavy tech influence early on. And then I would say I probably went into engineering mostly because I'm the gearhead. I'm big into cars, and that probably drove me there. But then I went to Georgia Tech, and as far as my journey kind of started there, worked at Yamaha. And then from there, I graduated in 2009, so the economy had just crashed, and basically no one was hiring. So I ended up going to the Air Force and started at Robins Air Force Base.
That's incredible.
And it's been about 10 years with DoD, but at Robins, I was focused more on C-17 support equipment design, so I got to do a lot of CAD work, and I really enjoyed that. Briefly went to DCMA, to the Defense Contract Management Agency, and then took that role that I mentioned earlier at Tyndall Air Force Base. So I was mainly focused on EOD robotics and on the small UAS program. But through that, the Air Force paid for me to get my MBA, my PMP. So after that, then I ended up coming back to Atlanta and took the position with UPS.
So you have the MBA and the PMP too. Wow. So she is motivated, I can tell. Well, let's talk about role models and what companies can do. You talked about your parents influencing you, and I think that's great, especially being exposed to all of this at an early age, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of get that mindset early on. Maybe people who don't have that kind of role model, what can companies do to start establishing programs that provide younger women this opportunity?
So I was with GE Aviation and the Women in Tech, and part of it was we started looking at where do people fall out of or decide not to go into the engineering technology fields. And there are various points where those decisions are made in larger quantities at the transitions, like from elementary to middle school to high school, and then high school, college. At that. And so we looked at how do we plug in those different gaps, and how do we help the transition, keep the pipeline, keep the training along the way. And so that's where we adopted the first robotics program, which we can talk more about.
I definitely want to talk about
but then when you look at from a company perspective, that having like the leadership development programs, one of the things I was very proud of that GE had made a commitment that their classes of the leadership development program would be 50% women in the Edison program. And they actually did not lower their standards. It was just making sure that they went for and tried and talked to 50% women to get into that leadership development program. And with that, that gives more exposure, more women come into the company and hopefully stay in the pipeline.
Yeah, so they really had the focus all the way down to making sure that they were finding women at the right places.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the right time. Yeah. What about you,
Yeah,
Jessica?
so I'll start with UPS. So we have a lot of women-focused programs and initiatives, and a heavy focus on diversity and inclusion and equity. And I think for me, the biggest resource that I've found has been our business resource groups, specifically with the Women's Leadership Development Group. So I'm actually a co-chair on our Community Connections Committee, but that has been a huge resource for me for networking, mentorship, with other women and men also, but and then reaching out to the communities and bringing people in to kind of give us a different perspective. Specifically on Flight Forward, I would say one thing that we have done is with our advanced technology group in UPS. We have created sort of a STEM roadshow. So we go out and we bring robotics and we bring drones, and we have a drone obstacle course, and we bring that out and let the kids fly the drone through the obstacle course. And I've had a lot of great feedback from that. I've had a lot of high schoolers reach out to me and ask about internships, ask about school and advice. I think the biggest thing though was the kindergarten class we went to. They probably asked the hardest questions, the most questions, and they were the most engaged of any grade level I think that we went to. And I asked them how many of them had drones at home, and I think over 75% of them raised their hands. And this was at age 5. So I think that's a great sign, I think, for the industry, because for me that's when it started. And I do believe I had the role models, my parents and my teachers, but I think if you don't start that at an early age, it's really on us to do that.
Well, it's almost like they started with smartphones and
Get the exposures.
But I think we can all.
now they'll start with drones.
more. Yeah. I think some things like that we could do, employers can do is really start looking at hiring. Look at different pools. If you don't have diversity, then start reaching out to different hiring pools. And once you get them in, you have to retain them. And I think the only way is really making sure you're actually listening and acting on and showing them that you care about their opinions. If you always have the same people in the room making decisions, you're never going to have diversity of thought. So bringing new people in, I think, is something that we can all work.
And of course, why we are all here today,
Yes.
Women in Drones. So Women in Drones, of course, being a huge advocate of trying to create diversity in the workforce talent here at all ages. So we're happy to be here. Let me ask you, we're going to probably have to wrap soon, but I want to ask you, what would you say to yourself or another younger girl? How do you get them and inspire them at that early age to come into this direction? What would you be telling your younger self?
I could start.
Sure.
So I would say, you're going to have people that may not support you along the way or disadvantages, but I would say use those disadvantages to your advantage. If you're, one of only a few, or maybe the only girl in your class or wherever, to, use that to get noticed and, work hard, take the hardest classes you can. And then once you have that voice, you can use that voice to now lift up other women and bring other women in. I think that's really important, but I still think at that early age, it's on us, it's on the parents and the teachers to make sure you're exposing your girls and boys to technology at an early age.
I would say to explore, that look at the different areas, and not like engineering and science. There are so many different focus areas. So go to the explorers, go to the camps, go to the science museum, explore. And then this will sound contrarian, but don't always listen to your moms. So one of the things
That was going through my mind, actually.
don't always listen to your moms, because when we were as part of why are girls not taking those harder classes, or why aren't they going into the fields that enable, it was the moms that were, hey, you need to have the time off, so go become a teacher, or nursing's always needed. It's like, well, why aren't you going for that higher level? Why aren't you becoming the doctor instead of the nurse, or the scientist instead of the admin and stuff like that? And so don't listen to the moms and go for the top dream and go for the science and tech.
I'll have to say, if my mom is watching this, or will be watching this, she did encourage me along the way.
Mine did, but so many moms do not. And so that is...
Yeah, mine did as well.
So that I remember going to the computer room with the key punch cards early on. She was in a computer program, what we would call coders now, right? So yeah, that was fun with the big old
stacks.
Yeah, I was gaming on an Apple IIe computer.
Yeah.
I taught myself to read in the
Compact?
late 80s on an Apple.
You might remember the compact.
Oh yeah. Or the ones that you need, the handles and stuff.
All right. So I guess I wanted to just say, what advice, again, in closing, so we're giving advice to our younger selves, giving advice to how to start these programs, right? What about what can employers do better? We talked a lot about the different programs that they have, but is there anything that, I mean, you have a robotics program that you're very highly involved with. Do you have companies sponsoring that with you?
Well, companies, two different parts. There's always a large need in your local community for STEM outreach, like the FIRST robotics programs that I'm affiliated, but we can always use money because these things take money, or the drone programs, there's a number of different drone possibilities. But we really need mentors. Mentors that would step up, give the time, provide the guidance, have the conversations. You would not believe how much it's having the conversations with the students that you're guiding, that you show them and guide them to become the next generation.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Really doing more. I see so much more value in those STEM outreach events that we do, and getting more time with the kids, and especially at an early age. Again, I think that's probably the most important thing that sometimes gets overlooked is putting effort and time, and actually taking away from your typical work to do that, because it is eventually going to come back to us in the future.
So the companies that will win are the ones that are investing this time and funding, and they need to recognize that it is going to take time to build these programs.
And like when I was with GE, it wasn't just for helping the future. It was actually getting that pipeline, because the students will now have the better reputation and understanding of what the company does, know what they're getting into as well. And so it was a mutual benefit, and we have hired.
Well, you two are incredibly talented. I am just honored to be sitting next to both of you, and looking forward to the rest of the day that we'll have together here at CES 2023 Women in Drones.